Sarah Martinez had always felt safe walking home from her evening shift at the local diner. The small town of Riverside had been her home for 3 years, ever since she moved there to start fresh after her divorce. The tree-lined streets and friendly neighbors made it feel like the kind of place where nothing bad could happen. On that Tuesday night in October, the autumn air carried the scent of burning leaves as Sarah made her usual walk down Maple Street. Her white sneakers made soft sounds against the sidewalk as she passed the familiar houses, most with their porch lights glowing warmly. She was thinking about her 8-year-old daughter Emma, who was staying with her grandmother for the week, when she noticed the footsteps behind her. At first, Sarah didn't think much of it. Other people walked these streets at night. But, as she turned the corner onto her street, the footsteps quickened. Her heart began to race as she fumbled for her house keys, her hands shaking slightly as she approached her small blue house at the end of the block. The attack came without warning. 3 men emerged from the shadows between 2 parked cars, their faces partially hidden by dark hoodies. The largest one, a man with cold eyes and a scar running down his left cheek, grabbed Sarah's arm with crushing force. She tried to scream, but another man, thin and nervous-looking, clamped his hand over her mouth. "Don't make a sound," the scarred man hissed, his breath reeking of alcohol and cigarettes. "Give us your purse and jewelry, and maybe we'll let you go home to your little girl." The mention of Emma sent terror through Sarah's entire body. How did they know about her daughter? Had they been watching her? Planning this? Her mind raced with horrifying possibilities as the third attacker, a younger man with tattoos covering his neck, rifled through her small purse. $23, he sneered, holding up the crumpled bills. "That's all you got? Lady, you're gonna have to do better than that." Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "That's all I have. Please, just let me go. I won't tell anyone." The scarred man's laugh was cold and cruel. "Oh, we know you won't tell anyone. But we came here for more than pocket change." His grip tightened on her arm until she gasped in pain. "We know you work at that diner. We know you walk home alone every night. We've been watching." The realization hit Sarah like a physical blow. This wasn't random. They had targeted her, studied her routine, planned this attack. The thought made her legs feel weak, but something deeper began to stir inside her. Not just fear, but anger. "My neighbor," she managed to say, looking toward the house next door where a light was on. "He's a veteran. He'll hear if I scream." The tattooed man laughed. "That old man. He's deaf as a post. Besides, we already checked. He's not even home tonight." They had done their homework. They knew about her routine, about Emma, about her neighbor Mr. Richardson, who usually kept an eye on the neighborhood. Sarah felt utterly alone and helpless as the 3 men dragged her toward the alley behind her house. The next 20 minutes would change Sarah's life forever. The attack was brutal and calculated. They took turns hurting her, their words as violent as their actions. They told her exactly what they thought of women who walked alone at night. They described in graphic detail what they planned to do to her daughter when they came back. They made it clear this was about power, about making her feel small and helpless. When it was over, Sarah lay on the cold ground behind her house, her clothes torn, her body aching, her spirit seemingly broken. The 3 men stood over her, breathing heavily. "Remember," the scarred man said, his voice still calm and controlled, "you didn't see our faces. You don't know who we are. If you go to the police, we'll come back for your little girl. We know where she goes to school. We know her grandmother's address." They left her there in the darkness, their laughter echoing off the alley walls as they disappeared into the night. Sarah lay still for what felt like hours, staring up at the stars that seemed too bright and cheerful for what had just happened. Every part of her body hurt, but the emotional pain cut even deeper. Somehow, she managed to pull herself to her feet and stumble to her back door. Her hands shook so violently that it took several tries to get the key in the lock. Once inside, she slumped against the door and let the tears come. Great, heaving sobs that seemed to tear at her chest. The house felt different now. What had been her safe haven now felt exposed and vulnerable. Every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. Every sound from outside made her jump. The men's words echoed in her mind. They knew where Emma went to school, where her grandmother lived. They had made it clear this wasn't over. Sarah made her way to the bathroom and caught sight of herself in the mirror. The woman looking back at her seemed like a stranger. Her face was bruised, her lips split, her eyes red and swollen from crying. But it was something deeper that had changed. The confident woman who had rebuilt her life after divorce was gone, replaced by someone who looked fragile and defeated. She ran a hot bath and sank into the water, hoping it might wash away what had happened. But as she sat there, the men's threats played over and over in her mind. They weren't done with her. This was just the beginning. They wanted her to live in fear, to always be looking over her shoulder, to never feel safe again. The phone rang, making her jump so violently that water sloshed over the edge of the tub. For a moment, she couldn't move. What if it was them? What if they had gotten her number somehow? With trembling fingers, she reached for the phone. "Sarah? Honey, is everything okay?" It was her mother's voice, calling to check on her as she did every Tuesday night. Sarah opened her mouth to tell her everything, to beg for help, to ask her to keep Emma safe. But the words wouldn't come. Instead, she heard herself saying, "I'm fine, Mom. Just tired from work." They talked for a few more minutes about everyday things, Emma's school project, the weather, plans for the weekend. Normal conversations that now felt like they belonged to someone else's life. When she hung up, Sarah realized she had made a choice. She wasn't going to tell anyone. Not yet. That night, Sarah didn't sleep. She sat in her living room with all the lights on, a kitchen knife on the table beside her, watching the windows and listening for any sound that might signal their return. Every car that passed made her heart race. Every footstep on the sidewalk sent panic through her system. As dawn broke over Riverside, painting the sky in soft pastels, Sarah finally allowed herself to believe she had survived the night. But she knew her real ordeal was just beginning. The three men had made it clear they would be back. They had planted seeds of terror that were already taking root in her mind. She thought about Emma, probably just waking up at her grandmother's house, excited about another day of her school vacation. Her innocent daughter had no idea that their world had just been shattered. How could Sarah protect her from men who seemed to know everything about their lives? The morning light revealed the full extent of her injuries. Bruises covered her arms and torso. Her neck bore marks that would take days to fade. But the physical wounds would heal. It was the psychological damage that worried her most. The constant fear, the feeling of being watched, the knowledge that somewhere in town, three men were planning their next move. As Sarah prepared for another day of pretending everything was normal, she had no idea that help was about to arrive from an unexpected source. Her neighbor, Mr. Richardson, the veteran she thought was away, had actually been on a late-night training exercise with his old military unit. He was a retired Navy SEAL who had seen more combat than most people could imagine, and he had been watching the neighborhood more carefully than anyone realized. Marcus Richardson had been awake for 36 hours straight when he finally pulled into his driveway at 3:47 a.m. The retired Navy SEAL was exhausted from a training exercise with his former unit, but something felt wrong as he sat in his pickup truck looking at his quiet neighborhood. 25 years of special operations had given him instincts that never switched off, and right now those instincts were screaming. The street was too quiet. Not the peaceful quiet of a sleeping community, but the tense silence that follows violence. Marcus stepped out of his truck and immediately noticed the details others would miss. Fresh tire tracks in the alley behind Sarah's house. Disturbed gravel. A small piece of torn fabric caught on a fence post. Marcus had been keeping an eye on his young neighbor ever since she moved in 3 years ago. Not in a creepy way. He was old enough to be her father, but because he recognized something in her. The same look he'd seen in refugees in war zones. Someone who had been hurt before and was trying to rebuild. Someone who deserved protection. He also knew she was a single mother. He'd seen her daughter Emma playing in the backyard, heard Sarah reading bedtime stories through the thin walls between their houses. In his mind, they had become the family he'd never had, the civilians he'd spent his career protecting from a distance. As Marcus examined the evidence in his backyard, his blood began to boil. Someone had hurt Sarah. The signs were all there if you knew how to read them. The question was, what was he going to do about it? For the next 3 days, Marcus watched and waited. He saw Sarah leave for work each morning, moving differently than before. Her shoulders were hunched, her eyes constantly scanning her surroundings. She jumped at sudden noises and had installed additional locks on her doors. Every behavior screamed victim of violent crime. On Thursday morning, Marcus was tending his garden when he heard Sarah's phone ring through her kitchen window. What he heard next made his hands clench into fists. Please, Sarah's voice was barely a whisper. I told you I don't have any money. My daughter isn't even here. There was a pause, then, I know you're watching me. I see your car. Please just leave us alone. Marcus moved closer to the fence, staying hidden behind his shed. Through the window, he could see Sarah's reflection in her microwave door. She was crying, her whole body shaking as she gripped the phone. Tonight, her voice cracked. But, you said if I kept quiet. Another pause. Then, Sarah hung up and immediately called someone else. Mom, I need you to keep Emma for another week. Don't ask questions, just please keep her safe. Don't let her go anywhere alone. And if anyone asks about her, don't tell them anything. That evening, Marcus was ready. He had changed into dark clothing and positioned himself where he could watch Sarah's house without being seen. His old sniper training came back like muscle memory as he settled in for a long night of surveillance. Sarah came home from her shift at 9:15 p.m., exactly as she had the previous nights. But, tonight, she wasn't alone. 3 men had been waiting in the alley, just as Marcus suspected they would be. Through his scope, Marcus studied each face carefully. The leader was a man in his 30s with a distinctive scar and cold, predatory eyes. The second was nervous and thin, constantly looking around. The third was younger, probably early 20s, with visible tattoos and an arrogant swagger. Marcus watched as they approached Sarah's back door. His finger moved to his phone, ready to call 911. But then, he heard their conversation and realized this was about more than a simple break-in. Did you miss us, Sarah? The scarred man's voice carried in the quiet night air. We told you we'd be back. I don't have any money, Sarah's voice was steady. But Marcus could see her hands shaking. I gave you everything I had. This isn't about money anymore, the tattooed one laughed. This is about teaching lessons. You see, we heard you thinking about going to the police. Can't have that. I didn't tell anyone, Sarah protested. I swear I didn't. But you thought about it, the thin man spoke up. We could see it in your eyes. Tonight, we're going to make sure you never think about it again. Marcus had heard enough. These weren't common criminals looking for quick cash. They were predators who had targeted Sarah specifically, who planned to continue terrorizing her indefinitely. The kind of evil he had spent his military career hunting down and eliminating. But Marcus was no longer a soldier. He was a civilian, bound by different rules. He couldn't simply eliminate threats the way he once had. Or could he? As the 3 men forced Sarah toward her back door, Marcus made a decision that would change everything. He wasn't going to call the police. He wasn't going to wait for the system to handle this. He was going to handle it himself. Moving with the silent efficiency that had made him legendary among his SEAL teammates, Marcus positioned himself behind the 3 attackers. The years of retirement melted away as his training took over. He became what his enemies had once feared most, a ghost in the darkness. The first man never knew what hit him. Marcus appeared behind the nervous thin one like a shadow, applying a sleeper hold with surgical precision. The man dropped without a sound, unconscious but alive. The tattooed younger man turned at the sound of his partner falling, but Marcus was already moving. A single strike to a pressure point sent him crumpling to the ground, gasping but unable to cry out. That left the leader, the scarred man who had been in the middle of threatening Sarah. He spun around to find himself face to face with someone he hadn't expected, a gray-haired man in his 50s who moved like death itself. Who the hell are you? The scarred man snarled, his hand moving towards something in his jacket. I'm her neighbor, Marcus said quietly, his voice carrying the kind of calm that only comes with absolute confidence. And you gentlemen have been disturbing the peace. The scarred man laughed, but there was uncertainty in his eyes now. Old man, you better walk away while you can still walk. I don't think so, Marcus replied. See, I've been watching you. I know you've been terrorizing my neighbor. I know you've threatened her daughter. And I know you think you're in control here. We are in control, the man said, but his voice lacked conviction now. Marcus smiled, and it wasn't a friendly expression. No, you're not. Not anymore. What happened next lasted less than 30 seconds. The scarred man reached for his weapon, but Marcus had anticipated this move. Years of training in close-quarters combat made the outcome inevitable. The leader found himself on the ground next to his unconscious partners, Marcus's knee on his chest, and his own weapon now in the SEAL's experienced hands. Sarah, Marcus called softly without taking his eyes off his captive. Go inside and lock the door. We need to talk, but not yet. Sarah, who had been frozen in shock during the brief encounter, stumbled toward her house. Before going inside, she turned back to look at her neighbor, this quiet man she had barely spoken to in 3 years, who had just taken down 3 attackers like it was nothing more difficult than taking out the trash. Who are you? She whispered. Someone who's been waiting a long time to meet these gentlemen, Marcus replied. Once Sarah was safely inside, Marcus turned his attention to his 3 captives. The thin man and the tattooed one were starting to wake up, groaning and trying to figure out what had happened. The scarred leader was fully conscious, but smart enough to stay very still with a trained killer kneeling on his chest. Gentlemen, Marcus said conversationally, we're going to have a little chat about your future career prospects. Specifically, about how your careers as predators are about to come to a permanent end. The scarred man tried to maintain his defiance. You can't do anything to us. We haven't done anything illegal tonight. Marcus laughed, a sound that made all 3 men shiver despite themselves. Oh, I think you're confused about how this works. See, I know exactly what you did to my neighbor 4 nights ago. I know about your threats against her daughter. And I know you plan to do worse tonight. Prove it, the man said, but his voice was weaker now. I don't have to prove anything, Marcus replied. Because we're not going to court. We're not involving lawyers. We're going to handle this the old-fashioned way. The thin man started to speak up. Look, man, we were just having some fun. We weren't going to really hurt her. Marcus's expression grew cold. Fun? You call terrorizing a single mother fun? His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. Gentlemen, I've spent 25 years hunting people like you in places you can't pronounce. I've eliminated threats to innocent people in ways you can't imagine. The only difference between now and then is that now I'm retired. You can't kill us, the tattooed one said, his bravado cracking. This isn't some war zone. You're right, Marcus agreed. I'm not going to kill you. That would be too easy. Instead, I'm going to give you a choice. He pulled out his phone and showed them the screen. See, while I was watching you tonight, I was also recording. I have video of you threatening my neighbor. I have audio of you admitting to previous attacks. I have enough evidence to put you away for a very long time. The 3 men exchanged worried glances. This wasn't going the way they had planned. Here's your choice, Marcus continued. Option 1. I call the police right now. You get arrested, go to trial, and spend the next 10 to 20 years in prison. But here's the thing about prison. Word gets around about what you did. Child predators and woman beaters don't do well in general population. He paused to let that sink in before continuing. Option 2. You disappear. Tonight. Forever. You leave this town, you leave this state, and you never come back. You never contact Sarah again. You never even think her name. You find new lives somewhere far away, and you become model citizens. And if we choose option 2? The scarred man asked. Marcus smiled again, that same cold expression that had terrified terrorists in 3 different countries. Then, you get to live. But, understand this, I'll be watching. I have friends in every major city in this country. People with very particular skills and very long memories. If any of you ever hurt another innocent person, if you even jaywalk in the wrong neighborhood, we'll know. And next time, there won't be a choice. The weight of his words settled over the 3 men like a blanket. They were beginning to understand that they hadn't just attacked a random woman. They had unknowingly declared war on someone who had spent his entire adult life winning wars. The scarred man, who had introduced himself as Jake Torelli when Marcus demanded their real names, tried one last time to assert control over the situation. You think you're some kind of hero, old man? You think this ends here? Marcus pulled out a tablet and showed them a series of photographs. The images made all 3 attackers go pale. Torelli, Jake Anthony, born 1989 in Detroit. 3 prior arrests for assault, 1 conviction for domestic violence. Currently wanted in Michigan for violation of parole. Marcus swiped to the next photo. Danny Reeves, burglary, drug possession, and 2 restraining orders from ex-girlfriends. And, finally, Trevor Nash, juvenile record sealed. But, I have friends who know exactly what you did to that 14-year-old girl when you were 17. Trevor, the tattooed youngest member of the group, started shaking. How did you? Those records are sealed. Son, Marcus said calmly. I know people who can unseal anything. But, more importantly, I know people who don't need official records to handle problems like you. Marcus swiped through more images on his tablet. Security camera footage from around town showing the three men following Sarah on different nights. Photos of them casing her house. Screenshots of social media posts where they had bragged about their hunting expeditions. You boys weren't as careful as you thought, Marcus continued. Danny, you used your real credit card at the gas station across from Sarah's diner. Trevor, you posted on social media about teaching stuck-up women lessons 3 hours before the attack. And, Jake, you left DNA evidence at the scene when you bled on Sarah's fence post. Jake's hand instinctively moved to a cut on his knuckle he had thought was too minor to worry about. The question is, Marcus said, putting away the tablet, what am I going to do with all this information? For the first time since the attack began, Danny spoke up. What do you want from us? I want you to understand who you're dealing with, Marcus replied. He pulled out his phone and made a call, putting it on speaker. Richardson, a gravelly voice answered. Didn't expect to hear from you this late. Sorry to wake you, Chief. Need a favor. Got 3 individuals here who have been terrorizing a civilian. Wondering if you could run some background checks. Names. Marcus read off the 3 names and birth dates. There was silence for a moment. Then, the sound of typing. Jesus, Marcus. Where did you find these winners? Torelli's got warrants in 3 states. Reeves is wanted for questioning in a sexual assault case in Ohio. And, Nash, this kid's been escalating for years. Local PD has been looking for him in connection with 2 home invasions. Appreciate the information, Chief. Want me to send a unit? Marcus looked at the 3 terrified men. Not yet. Still gathering intelligence. Roger that. You need anything else, you call. Good to hear from you. Even under the circumstances. Marcus hung up and turned back to his captives. That was Chief Petty Officer Williams, retired Navy intelligence. He runs a private security consulting firm now. Has contacts in every major police department in the country. He made another call. This time a woman answered. Marcus? It's past midnight. This better be important. Sorry, Agent Carter. Need to verify some information on 3 subjects. Agent Carter, it became clear during the conversation, worked for the FBI and had access to databases that made the local police records look like a children's library. By the time Marcus finished the call, he had enough information to destroy all 3 men's lives completely. Now I'm going to make one more call, Marcus said, dialing a number from memory. This one's my favorite. The phone rang twice before a man with a slight southern accent answered. Well, Marcus Richardson. I heard you were living the quiet life these days. Mostly, Colonel. But sometimes the quiet life finds its way to you. What do you need? Got 3 individuals who have been targeting civilians. Wondering if you might have any insight into their activities. Send me their information. Marcus quickly transmitted photos and data to his contact. Within minutes, the man called back. Marcus, your boys have been busy. We've been tracking a network of predators operating in small towns across the Midwest. These 3 are part of a larger organization. They target single women, terrorize them for weeks or months, then move on to the next town. The 3 attackers looked at each other in growing panic. Their random attack on Sarah was apparently part of something much bigger and more organized than they had admitted. How many victims? Marcus asked. Confirmed? 17 women across 6 states. But we think the real number is much higher. Marcus felt a cold rage building in his chest. These weren't just local predators. They were part of a systematic campaign to terrorize innocent women. What's the federal interest? They've been crossing state lines, using the internet to coordinate, and we have evidence they've been trafficking some of their victims. This is a federal case now, Marcus. Understood. Will you need these 3 for questioning? Eventually. But, Marcus, if something were to happen to them before we could arrange pickup, well, it would certainly make the case against the rest of the network more interesting. Marcus understood the unspoken message. The federal government would not be heartbroken if 3 predators disappeared from the face of the earth. After ending the call, Marcus turned back to his captives, who had heard enough to understand their situation had become much more serious. Gentlemen, Marcus said quietly, it appears you've been busier than I originally thought. The FBI is very interested in your organization. They know about your other victims. They know about your network. Jake tried one last desperate play. Look, we're small players. We can give you information about the bigger guys. Names, locations, operations. Marcus shook his head. Too late for that. You had your chance to choose a different path. Now you're federal fugitives. He pulled out a different phone, one that looked more military in design. This is a satellite phone. Direct line to some people who don't officially exist. People who handle problems that regular law enforcement can't touch. Trevor started crying. Please, man. We didn't know about the federal case. We were just what? Marcus's voice cut through the night like a blade. Just terrorizing innocent women for fun? Just threatening children? Just destroying lives because you could? Danny tried to bargain. We'll take option 2. We'll disappear. We'll never hurt anyone again. Marcus studied them for a long moment. The problem is, I don't believe you. See, I've been watching predators like you for 25 years. You don't change. You just get better at hiding. He stood up and walked a few steps away, still keeping the 3 men in sight. But I'm going to give you something better than option 2. I'm going to give you option 3. What's option 3? Jake asked, though he seemed afraid to hear the answer. Marcus turned back to them with that cold smile. Option 3 is you're going to help me destroy your entire network. You're going to give me names, locations, methods, victims, everything. And then you're going to disappear so completely that even I won't be able to find you. And if we refuse, then I make that satellite phone call, and by morning there will be 3 fewer predators in the world. Your choice. For the next 2 hours, Marcus extracted every piece of information the 3 men had about their network. Names, addresses, methods of operation, planned targets, and the location of their main base of operations 2 states away. By dawn, he had enough intelligence to dismantle an organization that had terrorized dozens of women across the Midwest. You've been very helpful, Marcus said as the sun began to rise. Now comes the hard part. What hard part? Trevor asked nervously. Marcus smiled one more time, and this time it was genuinely terrifying. Now you have to disappear. Completely. Forever. Because in about 6 hours, I'm going to start hunting your friends. And when I do, they're going to be very interested in knowing who gave me their information. The 3 men realized with growing horror that Marcus had just made them traitors to their own organization. They couldn't go back to their network because they would be killed as informants. They couldn't stay in the area because Marcus would be watching them. They had no choice but to run and never stop running. You planned this, Jake said with dawning understanding. From the moment you captured us, you planned to use us to destroy our own organization. Marcus nodded. I told you I spent 25 years hunting predators. This is how it's done. You turn the hunters into the hunted. As the 3 men stumbled away into the morning light, broken and terrified, Marcus turned his attention to Sarah's house. She had been through hell, but it was finally over. The immediate threat was neutralized, and soon the entire network that had spawned these predators would be dismantled. But first, he had a neighbor to check on. A brave woman who had survived something unthinkable and deserved to know that she was finally safe. Sarah had spent the entire night pressed against her kitchen window, watching in amazement as her quiet neighbor systematically dismantled the 3 men who had turned her life into a nightmare. When the sun finally rose and the attackers stumbled away like broken toys, she realized she was crying, not from fear this time, but from relief. A soft knock on her back door made her jump, but when she looked out, it was just Marcus standing there with his hands visible and a gentle expression on his weathered face. Sarah? It's Marcus Richardson, your neighbor. Are you okay? With shaking hands, she unlocked the door and opened it slowly. Marcus stood there in the morning light, looking nothing like the deadly ghost who had taken apart 3 violent men just hours earlier. He looked like what he was, a concerned neighbor who wanted to help. Who are you really? Sarah asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus smiled sadly. Just a retired sailor who's been worried about his neighbor. May I come in? We have a lot to talk about. Over coffee in her kitchen, Marcus told Sarah everything. About his 25 years as a Navy SEAL. About the missions he couldn't discuss, and the enemies he'd faced in places she'd never heard of. About retiring to this quiet neighborhood because he thought his fighting days were over. I've been keeping an eye on you and Emma since you moved in, he admitted. Not in a creepy way, he added quickly, seeing her expression. But you reminded me of someone who needed protecting. I could see it in the way you carried yourself. Like someone who had been hurt before. Sarah nodded slowly. My ex-husband. He was violent. That's why I moved here. I thought I'd found somewhere safe. You did find somewhere safe, Marcus said firmly. Those 3 men are never coming back. And their friends won't be bothering anyone else either. What did you do to them? Marcus's expression grew serious. I gave them a choice. They could face federal prosecution as part of a larger criminal organization, or they could disappear forever. They chose to disappear. Federal prosecution? Sarah, those men weren't just random criminals. They were part of a network that has been terrorizing women across multiple states. The FBI has been tracking them for months. Sarah felt sick. How many other women? 17 confirmed victims. But it's over now. The information I got from them tonight will help law enforcement dismantle the entire organization. Over the next several days, Marcus proved his words true. Using the intelligence he had gathered, federal agents began a coordinated sweep across 6 states. The network's leadership was arrested. Safe houses were raided. Victims were identified and offered help. The entire operation was dismantled with surgical precision. Sarah watched the news coverage with a mixture of amazement and horror. The FBI spokesman described it as one of the largest domestic terrorism organizations they had ever encountered. Women who had been living in fear for months or years finally came forward to testify. The scope of the crimes was staggering. How did they catch them all so quickly? Sarah asked Marcus as they watched the evening news together. Good intelligence, Marcus replied simply. When you know where to look and what to look for, operations like this move fast. He didn't tell her about the satellite phone calls he had made, about former teammates who had happened to be in the right cities at the right times when arrests needed to be made, about the colonel who had personally led raids on 3 safe houses simultaneously. Some secrets were better kept. A week after the arrests began, Agent Carter visited Sarah personally. She was a serious woman in her 40s who spoke with authority and compassion. Mrs. Martinez, I want you to know that your case was the key that unlocked this entire investigation. Without what happened to you, we might never have identified this network. I didn't do anything, Sarah protested. I was just a victim. You survived, Agent Carter replied. And your neighbor's response led us to them. Sometimes justice comes from unexpected places. She paused, studying Sarah carefully. I also want you to know that Mr. Richardson is someone we hold in very high regard. His service to this country was exemplary. If he tells you you're safe, you can believe it. After Agent Carter left, Sarah found herself looking at Marcus with new eyes. This man who had quietly tended his garden and fixed her fence when it broke had apparently spent decades protecting people like her in the most dangerous places on earth. Why didn't you ever tell me? She asked him. Marcus shrugged. It never came up. I'm retired. I wanted to be just a neighbor. But you weren't just a neighbor when it mattered. No, Marcus agreed. I guess old habits die hard. The healing process was slow but steady. Sarah started therapy with a counselor who specialized in trauma victims. Emma came home from her grandmother's house, and Sarah was able to hold her daughter without the constant fear that had plagued her for weeks. Marcus became a regular presence in their lives, but always respectfully. He helped Emma with a school project about military history. He taught Sarah some basic self-defense techniques, not because she needed them anymore, but because they helped her feel more confident. Will they really never come back? Sarah asked one evening as they sat on her back porch watching Emma play in the yard. Marcus was quiet for a long moment before answering. The 3 who hurt you? They're gone. Really gone. They understand that if they ever surface again, anywhere, there will be consequences they can't imagine. And the others? The ones who aren't in federal prison are scattered to the wind. Their organization is destroyed, their leadership captured, their resources seized. It would take them years to rebuild, if they could ever trust each other again after being betrayed by their own people. Sarah realized he was talking about how he had turned the 3 attackers into informants against their own network. The psychological warfare was as devastating as any physical attack could have been. You really did break them completely, didn't you? Marcus nodded. That was always the plan. Sometimes the most effective way to defeat an enemy is to make them defeat themselves. 3 months later, Sarah was walking home from work when she saw a familiar figure working in his garden. But this time, instead of hurrying past with her head down, she stopped to talk. Evening, Marcus. How are the tomatoes coming along? Marcus looked up with a genuine smile. Good crop this year. Want some? I always plant too many. As they chatted about normal neighborhood things, gardening, weather, Emma's upcoming school play, Sarah realized something had changed. The fear was gone. The constant vigilance had faded. She felt safe in her own neighborhood again. "Marcus," she said as she prepared to go inside. "Yeah, thank you. For everything." Marcus nodded, understanding all the things she couldn't put into words. That's what neighbors are for. Later that evening, Marcus received a call on his regular phone. "Richardson, this is Agent Carter. Wanted to give you an update on the network prosecutions. Good news, I hope?" "Very good. 17 defendants. Federal charges ranging from kidnapping to conspiracy. The plea bargains are rolling in. We're looking at sentences ranging from 15 years to life. And the 3 from Sarah's case? Still missing. Completely off the grid. Honestly, it's like they never existed." Marcus smiled. Sometimes that's the best outcome for everyone involved. "There is one other thing," Agent Carter continued. "We've had inquiries from other jurisdictions. Similar patterns, similar organizations. If you're interested in consulting work." "I'm retired, Agent Carter. Happy being a neighbor." "I understand. But, Marcus, if anything like this ever comes up again, you call us first. No more lone wolf operations." "Understood." After hanging up, Marcus sat on his back porch and looked over at Sarah's house. Lights were on in Emma's room, probably reading time before bed. Normal family sounds drifted through the evening air. A mother and daughter living their lives without fear. This was why he had spent 25 years in the world's most dangerous places. Not for medals or recognition or glory. For moments like this. For the knowledge that somewhere, innocent people were safe because he had been willing to stand between them and the darkness. His phone buzzed with a text message. 3 words, "We're still watching." Marcus smiled and deleted the message. Let them watch. Let them know that some neighborhoods were protected by more than just police patrols and security cameras. Let them know that some people would never be victims because others would never stop being guardians. The network was broken. The immediate threat was eliminated. Sarah and Emma were safe. Justice had been served, though not in any courtroom. Sometimes, Marcus reflected, the best victories were the ones no one ever heard about. The quiet defeats of evil that let good people live normal lives. The invisible wars fought by invisible warriors who asked for nothing more than the chance to protect the innocent. As he went inside for the night, Marcus could hear Sarah reading to Emma through the thin walls. A bedtime story about brave princesses and helpful neighbors. Tomorrow would be another peaceful day in a quiet neighborhood where nothing bad ever happened. Because someone was always watching. Always ready. Always willing to step out of retirement one more time if darkness ever threatened the light again. The 3 men who had attacked Sarah were truly gone, scattered to the winds with new identities and the constant knowledge that they were being watched by people they could never see or escape. The network that had spawned them was dismantled completely, its members either in federal prison or too afraid to ever work together again. And Sarah Martinez could walk home from work every evening without looking over her shoulder, secure in the knowledge that some neighbors were more than they appeared to be, and that justice, when it finally came, was both swift and absolute.